In a world where the sun rises but gives no warmth, where light reflects off endless ice yet hides death beneath its beauty, survival is not just a fight, it's a transformation. This is not just a story of a woman lost in a frozen wilderness. This is the story of how she refused to die, of how fear turned into strength, weakness into instinct, and a human into something far more dangerous, something that could outlast the cold itself. Watch till the end, because this journey isn't about comfort. It's about survival at its rawest form. That ancient ice-covered world was a cruel time when even though the sun rose in the sky, there was no warmth within it, and its light fell upon the snow only to create a blinding white glare, but beneath that glare was hidden death, and within that death a lone woman kept moving forward, her body exhausted and weak, yet inside her was a force that refused to let her stop because she knew that standing still in this world meant freezing, and freezing meant the end. Beneath her feet, the snow crunched sharply, and that sound reminded her every moment how alone and how fragile she was against this vast white world. The wind struck her face and brought tears to her eyes, but she did not close them because she knew closing her eyes meant losing direction. And losing direction meant never returning again. She had been walking for a long time, and her body was slowly losing strength. Her stomach was empty, and her hunger had turned into pain. She knew she had to find food or her body would no longer move. But in this frozen world, food meant danger, and she had almost no strength left to take that risk. Suddenly, she stopped because she saw marks on the snow. The marks were fresh and clear, and she understood they were footprints of an animal. Her heart began to pound. Because those tracks could lead her to food or straight to death, she slowly began following them. Her body low, her eyes fixed, her breathing controlled, her mind completely alert, because she knew she could not make a mistake now. In the distance, she saw a massive fur-covered creature digging through the snow, searching for something. Its body was powerful, and every movement was slow but heavy with strength. Seeing it brought a mix of fear and hope into her eyes, because she knew this creature could save her or end her. She lowered herself even more and moved forward, her hands touching the snow as the cold seeped into her body. But she did not stop, because she knew this moment could change her life. Suddenly the wind stopped and the entire world fell silent as if time itself had paused. The woman moved forward slowly, her eyes locked on her target, her mind prepared. In this moment, she was no longer just a weak human. She was a survivor, and in that brutal frozen world, her story had only just begun. She moved slowly across the snow, each step calculated, because she knew even the smallest mistake would end everything. Her eyes were fixed on the massive creature digging through the snow, each of its movements so heavy that the ground beneath trembled. Yet within that strength was carelessness, and that carelessness was her only chance. Her breathing slowed as her body blended into the snow to make no sound. The air remained still, helping her. But within that stillness was fear. Because if it broke, everything would change in an instant. She gripped the sharp stone in her hand tighter and moved closer. The snow beneath her feet wanted to crack, but she controlled her weight carefully to stay silent. Her eyes saw only the target now, and her fear slowly turned into strength. Just as she got close, the wind suddenly returned, carrying her scent. The massive creature froze and lifted its head, scanning the surroundings, its eyes alert again. And in that moment, her heart pounded as she realized her chance was slipping away. But she did not retreat because she had no other option. She suddenly lunged forward and struck with the stone, but the blow was not enough to stop the creature. Instead, it enraged it. The beast roared and turned, its eyes now fixed on its prey, and that prey stood before it. She stepped back but slipped and fell onto the snow. The creature advanced, each step shaking the ground, and in that moment the shadow of death appeared in her eyes. But she did not stop. She rolled aside quickly and somehow stood up. She began to run, her body exhausted, but fear drove her forward. The creature chased her, its roar echoing through the air, shaking the white world. As she ran, she suddenly saw a crack in the ice ahead. She could not stop, and at the last moment she leaped across it, her legs trembling, but she made it across. The creature followed, but its heavy body failed to cross, and it slipped and fell into the crack below. In an instant, everything went silent. She stood there breathing heavily, her body trembling, but she was alive. She slowly looked back and realized she had not hunted, but she had survived, and in this frozen world, survival was often a greater victory than the hunt. She began walking again, weaker now, but something new had formed inside her. She now knew that to survive, she had to be not only strong but smarter, and this fight was not over. It was only beginning. The last light of the sun faded beneath the icy horizon, and with it the world returned to its true form. Cold, dark, and silent like death itself. Danger hidden in every moment. And in that darkness stood the woman, exhausted, fading. Yet in her eyes still burned the last light of survival, because she knew if she did not survive this night, everything would end. The wind began to roar again, sharper and colder, her limbs growing numb, her breathing heavier. She could feel her strength slipping, but she did not stop, because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant never waking again. She searched for shelter, knowing she could not survive in the open. After some distance, she found a low depression in the snow, where the wind struck less. She sat there and curled her body tightly to preserve heat, but she knew that would not be enough. She had to make fire, because fire was the only thing that could keep her alive against the darkness and cold. She searched desperately, her hands trembling. Finally finding dry grass and small sticks hidden beneath the snow, she gathered them and took 2 stones, her hands shaking as she struck them together. Nothing happened at first, but she kept trying, her breathing heavy, the darkness now complete. In the distance, small glowing lights appeared, eyes of predators waiting for weakness. Her heart raced, but she did not look away. She had to make fire. She struck the stones again and again, her hands bleeding, until finally a spark appeared, falling onto the dry grass. Smoke rose slowly, then a small flame. She quickly fed it, growing the fire, its light touching her face. And in that light, her eyes reflected victory, because she had found a way to survive again. The fire spread warmth. The distant eyes disappeared, afraid of the flame. She sat beside it, her body still shaking but warmth returning. She held her hands close, feeling life return to her. The night was long, but she was no longer alone. The fire was her companion. Outside, the wind howled, but before that small flame, even darkness paused. She stared at it and understood that survival was not only about strength, but about creating light in the darkest moments, and that light would carry her to the next day. Morning came with cold light that brought no warmth. She sat by the fading fire, her body slightly recovered but still weak, knowing peace never lasted here. Soon the sky darkened again and a storm approached, stronger than before. She searched for shelter and found a hollow beneath a mound of snow. Struggling against the wind, she reached it and forced herself inside. Collapsing as the storm raged outside, snow began to seal the entrance, and she realized if she did nothing, she would be buried alive. With trembling hands, she began clearing the snow, her fingers numb, her vision fading, exhaustion pulling her towards sleep. A deadly sleep. But memories of her past and her fight brought her back. She forced herself to continue, clearing until a small opening allowed air in. She gasped deeply, alive again. The storm continued, but she endured, learning that survival required not just strength but willpower, because the body may fail, but the mind must not. Eventually, the storm passed and silence returned. She opened her eyes, weak but alive, stepping out into an even harsher white world, her greatest enemy now hunger. She searched again until she found small tracks, followed them carefully, and finally caught a small animal beneath the snow. Tears filled her eyes as she realized she had food. She made fire again and cooked it, each bite restoring her strength, hope returning. She knew she was still fighting, and that fight kept her alive. As evening came again, she heard heavy footsteps in the distance. A massive shadow emerging, another beast drawn by scent, but this time she was ready, holding a burning branch. She faced it, retreating carefully onto a frozen lake, knowing the ice might not hold. She ran, the creature chasing, until the ice cracked beneath its weight and it fell into freezing water, struggling before going still. She collapsed to her knees, trembling but calm, knowing she had survived again. She looked at the rising sun reflecting on the ice, and understood that the world had not changed, but she had. She stood and walked forward, seeing smoke in the distance, a sign of life, pushing herself until she reached people gathered around fire. They saw her, approached cautiously, then helped her as she collapsed, bringing her to warmth. She opened her eyes to firelight and realized she was no longer alone. Days passed and she healed among them, learning to live again. But she never forgot the frozen world, the storms, the hunts, the fire that saved her, because that frozen world had changed her, taught her how harsh life can be, and how strength is born within that harshness. And that is why her story is not just about survival. It is about breaking limits, about a woman who stood against a merciless world and did not surrender. And that is why her story does not end, because that strength still lives within her.